As we all know, the pandemic was difficult and it tested our resolve as individuals and as a community. We learned the true meaning of working together and the importance of leaning on one another as we collectively adapt to the change necessary. Martha's Vineyard Bank and Martha's Vineyard Bank Charitable Foundation dedicated about $1.2 million last year in direct donations to benefit the island in general, and also more specifically adapt and respond to the COVID-19 challenge. And we're very happy to do that because it's, beyond financial services, gives meaning to the work that we do and the reason that we exist. And so we're very happy to put our cheek to the wheel and contribute to projects like Test MV, which was a collaboration with Island Healthcare and the island's health agents, Quest Diagnostics, and the bank. And that kind of parlayed into Test ED, which is a testing program that we did in conjunction with the school systems and the very generous support of MV Youth as well. So that was a wonderful experience, but also a litany of other things that individual efforts that we contributed to. And as I say, that gives meaning to the work that we do and our ability to contribute to the community as a whole in a very impactful way. From the very onset of COVID, community services was ready. They really had to be, with thousands of islanders that depend on their support. They found creative ways to sustain their services and continue showing up to respond to the emerging and urgent needs throughout the pandemic, providing food to the families and children who needed it, resources for our seniors, access to vaccines for veterans, emergency health care, telehealth support, and urgent care to those in crisis. While we can't say what tomorrow might bring, we can sure say that community services will be there. We feel that, the bank, and I know that there's tremendous support across the community, leading by example and unwavering in their commitment to the island's community and ensuring that everyone on Martha's Vineyard has access to the care and services that we need. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce the leader behind the incredible organization, Chief Executive Officer of Martha's Vineyard Community Services, Beth Focarelli. Approaching her 1-year anniversary, she and I met just about this time last year in the middle of the pandemic crisis. So happy anniversary, your 1-year anniversary with Martha's Vineyard Community Services. Beth brings more than 30 years of experience in community-based nonprofit organizations with specialization in behavioral health, youth, and family services, as well as elder care. Prior to assuming her current role, Beth served as Chief Operating Officer for Gosnold Incorporated in Falmouth, Chief Executive Officer for Youth Opportunities Upheld in Worcester, Mass, and Chief Operating Officer for Fellowship Health Resources, a national nonprofit behavioral health care organization with headquarters in Lincoln, Rhode Island. With a very impressive background in quality and risk management, strategic business development, and organizational advancement, Beth brings an extensive range of expertise in developing and leading programs for vulnerable children, adults, and families. Beth is the right leader at the right time, certainly for community services, and I look forward to our continued partnership on behalf of our community. So with that, Beth, take it away.
Thank you, James, for that very warm welcome. And thank you for highlighting the work of the bank throughout the pandemic. You've been an invaluable partner, not only to community services, but to the entire island. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. We're big supporters.
Thanks. Thanks. Well, hi, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome. What a pleasure it is to connect or reconnect with each of you. You are all our most loyal and steadfast supporters, caring so deeply for Martha's Vineyard Community Services. As James mentioned, I'm nearing the completion of my first year as Chief Executive Officer, and as a new islander, I'm completely struck by the many ways our amazing organization has stepped forward as an impactful resource for islanders during COVID. I'm so proud of the way that we have emerged from the pandemic as a strong and resilient and vibrant organization, poised to serve in even greater ways moving forward. I'm here to speak to you today about the way community services rises up to serve all islanders. Our efforts during the pandemic were quiet and steady. Our humble staff made little fanfare about the work they were doing, and instead set aside their fears and their apprehensions in order to be there for those who count on them. My goal today is to introduce myself to all of you. We haven't had the chance to do that yet, and I look forward to doing that in person in the very near future, and to share with you the sound and stable and superb operations underway at Community Services. I hope to inspire you with stories on how we have served during the COVID pandemic, how we have been a helping partner to a community we love so much, and then end with my vision for community services moving forward. So during COVID, businesses shut down, the schools were closed intermittently, and life as previously known came to a grinding halt, but not so for us at Community Services. Called upon to take action in our community, we found ourselves unexpectedly cared for by this island community. It has been really an incredible experience, an unexpected, incredible experience. In times of crisis, the most vulnerable in our society are often the most hard hit. And we found that to be true during the pandemic. Let me share with you just a few ways we have led in service. We delivered more than 13,000 diapers and 25,000 pounds of food to islanders. We were undaunted by the reality that we could no longer provide behavioral health services face-to-face, and immediately pivoted to telehealth. And during the COVID pandemic, we delivered more than 15,000 interventions using the telehealth modality. And as we know, both children and adults were affected. Their mental health and substance use were affected during the pandemic, and we swiftly responded to that need. Our emergency response saw an uptick of 44% during the pandemic, and our emergency response team stepped forward to do that work, and we're so proud of the work that they've done. Let me now turn to speak a little bit about our most fragile islanders, our elders, persons with varying disabilities, those struggling with addiction, and families at risk for homelessness. These unseen islanders were significantly impacted by depression, anxiety, loneliness, and financial hardship COVID brought their way. We made house calls to elderly, dropping off care packages. We served nearly 60 veterans, providing for housing security, transportation, access to vaccines, and in one situation, funeral expense. We provided virtual self-help meetings and clinical intervention using telehealth for people struggling with their recovery. Quite honestly, so many people in addiction recovery found their recovery shattered during the pandemic, and we were there to support them. And along with our partners from the schools, hospital, and law enforcement, we distributed $350,000 in targeted gifts for rent, mortgage, and other financial hardships. And we just approve every Wednesday. We review those applications, and I just did that this morning, as did some of our other partners on this call. So we've been at it for over a year, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing in partnership with law enforcement and the schools and the hospital. From this experience, we find ourselves inspired by the courage of our clients, the resilience of islanders, and the generosity of our community. And I see Chief McNamee here today. Hi, Chief, and Lindsay Scott from MV Youth, and so many others here today who have supported our efforts. I want to take this opportunity to thank each of you for your particular role in supporting community services, in particular, in our island as a whole during the pandemic. We couldn't have done it without you. It's been a very, very long and difficult year. We're still struggling with the after effects of it as an organization and as an island. And now we move from spring to summer and from a lockdown to a gradual return to life. It's just really fabulous. I'm sure you all agree. It's just, the island is just beautiful this time of year, and I feel that resurgence in the air on the island. And with this, I'd like to share with you briefly my vision for community services future. Our vision centers on 3 priorities: to fortify our staff, number 1, to expand our services, number 2, and finally, to rebuild our space. Staff, services, and space, that's our focus. So let me share a sneak preview from our strategic plan that's due to be revealed to the public in July. To fortify our staff, we intend to create the Island Counseling Center Clinical Residency Program. The Clinical Residency Program will provide housing, employment, clinical supervision, clinical education, and so much more to 5 master's level residents who will live on the island and serve in our clinic. And this needs a dual need. Most of you know the struggle in attracting and retaining staff, and we find that to be true at our clinic. It will help to bring additional staff into our clinic, and it will also address the housing needs that so many employees have working on the island. To expand our services, we will rebuild our children's behavioral health division. Our children's services were, quite frankly, decimated during the pandemic as families just struggled to make ends meet, and had room for little else. And so, effective immediately, we will be investing in our children's behavioral health program. To rebuild our space, we continue our campus development across from the high school. In the early fall, we will proudly open our early childhood center, which, by the way, is on point, on time, and on budget. So even as a new islander, I understand that this could be an unprecedented feat for the Vineyard. And then we turn to the remainder of our campus development. Community Services capital campaign goal for phase 2 of our campus development is $18 million. And this campaign will restore an old, dilapidated campus to a shining new beginning, a place where our finest mental health, disability services, veteran services, and so much more will call home. We're really excited for this endeavor. So as you can see, we and you can move forward with promise and optimism to steer our island to its fullest potential. I look forward to working in partnership with each of you in our work in furthering community services. Together, we will commit our experience, our unique expertise, and compassion to fulfill our vital mission. What better way to learn more about our COVID experience than to hear directly from one of our stellar staff? And I'm so pleased to introduce Heather Quinn, who will speak to you next. Heather Quinn is our program director for all of our early childhood program. Heather truly reflects our agency's heroic response to the pandemic. Parents were so desperate for safe and effective childcare at a time where many of our staff left our employment for higher and private pay experiences. So our early childhood program was essentially left at bare bones. It was a very, very difficult time. And Heather just stepped right up to the plate. And for the last year, she's been serving as the administrator for all of our early childhood programs, but she's also been in the classroom every day. It's really amazing. I can't speak highly enough for her. And she has been able to restore that program to great health. And so I can't wait to hear from Heather as she shares with you her experience in restoring this wonderful program to its fullest potential and preparing it for our move to the new center in just a couple of months. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to share our story. We currently operate 3 early childhood programs. The first is the Martha's Vineyard Family Center, which offers parent education workshops, parent support groups, parent-child activities, as well as individualized family supports. It's important to note that those services are open to all families in our community, prenatal, pre-adoptive, all the way up through age 8. Our second program is our home-based Head Start program. That program targets families with preschool-age children living at or below the poverty line. Recognizing that parents really are their child's first and most important teacher, in that program we work directly with parents in the context of the home or the community, helping them to understand and support their children's development. Our third program is our Early Education and Care Center, which Beth referenced. That program serves infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. We're here 9 hours a day, 52 weeks a year. Currently, our program is the only one on the island that holds a contract with the state to offer subsidized slots for income-eligible families, as well as supportive slots for families who've had a substantiated case of abuse or neglect. We've seen a significant increase in the number of children that we're serving who've experienced childhood trauma, typically related to parental substance use, mental illness, or domestic violence, often some combination of all 3. And the impact of childhood trauma is profound, which has meant that we've really had to build capacity within our staff in order to meet the complex social and emotional needs that children are presenting with. The pandemic pretty immediately shone a spotlight on the foundational role that our early childhood programs play, both in our economy, as well as in the health and well-being of our community. Our Family Center and our Head Start program pretty immediately shifted to a virtual platform, which allowed us to serve families without disruption. We knew that social connections play a vital role in strengthening families, so we prioritized relationships, and that allowed us to truly understand and meet families' needs as the pandemic evolved. That included virtual parent support groups. It included delivering educational materials to families so they could play and learn together while at home. It also included what Beth mentioned, connecting families with valuable concrete resources. Our Early Education and Care Center presented the biggest challenge, as those services must be provided in person. When the governor shut down all schools last spring, we made the decision to reopen as what was called an exempt emergency child care center. And what that allowed us to do is continue to serve the children of essential workers and also vulnerable families in our community. I was very fortunate that we had 2 teachers who volunteered to operate the program alongside me. It was without a doubt the most challenging experience I've had as a teacher, but also the most rewarding. To offer a few examples of the impact that we had at that time, we cared for a 3-year-old boy whose single mother was working as a VNA during that shutdown period. We also cared for 2 school-age children whose parent was pretty recently in recovery, and prior to joining our program had been traveling to a methadone clinic on Cape Cod several times a week with her children in tow. When we reopened for regular programming last July, we experienced a devastating staffing crisis. It was around that time that Beth Vogel joined us, And she recognized that if we wanted to invest in the future of the children and families in this community, we really needed to invest in our workforce. We had educators who were hesitant to return to the classroom because they felt scared. The pause provided by the pandemic really also helped them to understand that their work had been undervalued and undercompensated for many years. So we developed the Pathway Program, which is a financial incentive program designed to attract and retain teachers who are passionate about what they do, who are committed to ongoing professional growth, and to reflect the diversity in our community. With the development of the Pathway Program and the construction of our state-of-the-art new early childhood center, Community Services really has committed to serving children and families in this community for generations to come. However, it is important to note that we will continue to rely on the support of our community in order to offer the program that we feel all children deserve. What we collect in tuition from families and the limited funding that we receive in subsidies from the state does not come close to covering the actual cost of care. So what that means is we will continue to rely heavily on philanthropic dollars in order for our program to survive. In close, the pandemic presented challenges that I know none of us ever imagined were even possible. It also, however, taught us some really valuable lessons. In our case, we were able to rebuild our early education and care center with a much stronger foundation. And we also had the opportunity to really reimagine what the future of our early childhood programs might look like. And I look forward to continuing to be a part of this organization and working with all of you for many years to come. I will turn things back over to Beth now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to indulge 1 minute and share with this group of fine supporters my litmus test for how you fared each and every day running the early childhood center. So Heather in the summertime would have a bun, and right here. And so I would gauge how difficult a time she was having by the position of that bun during the course of the day. And some days it was literally hanging off the side of her head, like sideways. So it was really quite funny. And I can honestly say that I've not once seen Heather undaunted by the challenges. She just step forward. And I think that as I think about this, first of all, I just think it's amazing. But secondly, and more importantly, I think it's just reflective of her passion for the work of our early childhood program. And I would love any of my nieces or nephews or any child I know to be part of our early childhood program under her leadership. She's really just that special and that wonderful. So, so Heather, I just wanted to thank you one more time for, I do thank Heather rather excessively, but I just happen to have a window view to the early childhood from my office, and I see it firsthand. I see the work done with screaming toddlers basically for 9 hours a day, as Heather mentioned, every day of the year. So pretty much every day of the year. And it is, it takes amazing patience to model the kind of behavior we are looking in our youngsters. And that's what she and her team do. So what you've heard this afternoon really is, I hope, are some inspiring stories as to how we fared during the pandemic, but also our bold goals for the future and our vision for better community services. So I think I'll turn it back over to Barbara, who can open it up for questions for me or members of my team.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth, Heather, and James. We really appreciate it. And I will echo Beth's sentiments about Heather in particular and the staff at Community Services in general. as someone who raises the funds to help us do our work, it is my honor to be able to work with staff members as committed and talented as they are. I see one question from Jill Goodman. Jill, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, well, after listening to Beth and Heather, and it's so uplifting to hear what's going on. I really, I wasn't here for a good part of the pandemic. I was in touch with people who just went on and on, about all the good things happening at community service. And Heather actually was my grandson's teacher one year at Chilmark School, and he got so much out of that. And I'm not one thing that Beth said surprises me about Heather. I give you so many kudos for that. So I guess my question is to Beth, when you've got all these priorities, which I've heard 3 major priorities, and the goals you've been describing, what would be your number 1 priority at this point? I mean, I get a feeling it's about staffing, because without the staff, you can't do anything. But your number 1 priority out of the 3 priorities, what would you say that would be?
Sure. Well, you're spot on. It is the staffing, because the staffing is our agency, and our staff make our engine run, and our community relies on them. And so in order to do some of the ambitious plans that we have as part of our strategic plan, I just shared a very small snapshot, but our board of directors, members of the community, management staff, and leadership staff have been working on this strategic plan since October, and it's full of expansion and expansion of our staffing and our services and the investments we want to make in our space. So I would say investing in our staff is always number 1. And the other 2 investments are kind of dovetail into that. Our investment in our space, our campus is a necessity. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity that we have a space that reflects the dignity our clients deserve. And our services are we're coming out of a pandemic, and we have some tired staff, but an energized staff. We're very, very well poised for what lies ahead. And so I think that is how I would address your question, Jill.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks, Jill. I have Ron Dunlap, who'll be next, then Vicki Duvall, then Iris Freeman. So Ron, if you'd like to go ahead.
So Heather, thank you for the marvelous job you've done. One of the problems that we have in medicine right now is that everyone's tired, and the idea that the pandemic is over is true, that we're not seeing epidemic spread of COVID-19, and that daycare centers were not really a source of spread, as children in daycare centers didn't really spread the virus. Most of the time, if it came into the center, it came from adults. But we're now faced with the fact that COVID is endemic, which means that it's here, and that we have pockets where people are not vaccinated, even in communities with high numbers of vaccinations. So the question is, what will your procedures be moving forward, and how will you restore the confidence of the parents who will be sending their kids to your centers, and will we be able to do it at the same volume that we did prior to the pandemic?
Thank you.
I can start that, and then turn it to you, Heather. Just in general, I can give a general, and I'm going to turn it over to Heather to speak to the specifics of child care. In general, our organization has really taken a fastidious approach to our COVID response. And so we have followed all the intricacies of the requirements. Several of our programs all of our programs are fairly highly regulated, and each have its own regulatory framework with specifications related to the services within that framework. And so we've attended to that and routinely update our COVID policy. The early childhood programs have very, very specific and prescriptive requirements. And I'll turn that over to Heather to elaborate more on how we ensure the safety and of our children in that particular program.
Yes. Ron, I will say one of the best decisions that we made was to become an exempt emergency child care provider, which was at that time during the pandemic, people were still wiping down their groceries because we really didn't understand how COVID spread. So we were, this program, myself and the other two educators were actually a part of helping to create the regulations that then guided all care. When programs were able to reopen last July. So I am incredibly grateful that I had that opportunity. Beth mentioned that I've been in the classroom, which is true, not necessarily where I expected to find myself, but although I've been an educator for 30 plus years, I've never been an educator during a pandemic. So I think I've actually been exactly where I needed to be. In order to instill a sense of confidence in our staff, I felt like I couldn't put myself in a position where I was asking people to do something that I wasn't doing myself. So I think teaching alongside everyone instilled a sense of confidence in the staff that we were able to retain and the staff that we've brought on. And really being pretty, I read everything that I possibly can, and really came to understand what mattered as far as safety in the context of a child care center. And we adhered to the protocols in a very strict way. The other piece I think was key was being communicative with our community. It was essential that we develop a sense of trust with families and have open communication. And we have lots of different ways that families communicate. We have a text messaging app where people have been able to communicate with me in the morning, in the evening, during the day, on the weekends, when things come up, so that they have a sense of security and safety. And we pretty much went overnight from having 48 pages of regulations down to 2 pages of regulations. So what that has meant is that we've really had to take all of the lessons that we've learned over the course of the last year and also believe in ourselves. And what I communicate to the teachers every day is that I believe in you. I have confidence in you. And, we've been doing this and we can continue to do this in a safe way. So I would say communication with staff, as well as developing that sense of community within our school community has made all the difference in the world.
Thanks, Heather. And thank you, Ron. The next question comes from Vicki Duvall.
Thank you, Barbara. I have, first of all, I want to thank Beth and Barbara and Heather for what you do, and to the rest of the staff as well. I hope you know how much you're valued by all of us and everyone in the community every day. And your reach is so broad and helps so many people. So thank you for that. And thank you for this forum, because it's a great way for those of us who want to stay up on what's happening at the community services to do that today. So thank you. I think it's very worthwhile. I just want to ask a sort of a broad question to Beth. Beth has talked about her vision for the future, her priorities. And I want to know what you need from us, what you need from the community, the people on the Zoom, and the broader community in order to help you move forward. That's my question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. I was struggling to unmute myself. I think that what would be most helpful is for those who are already passionate and support our organization to really step forward during this next phase in ways that they find that are meaningful to them. So to become an ambassador in the organization in a way that connects with you, because I think if you understand our quest and you know what we're focusing on, there might be bits and pieces of that. I'm looking at the folks who are on this Zoom today, and I know in particular certain areas of focus that are important. For example, you, Vicki, I know we've had multiple discussions on our emergency response system and working in conjunction with law enforcement. The same holds true for Chief McNamee, and that is in our strategic plan to have a more robust, collaborative, side-by-side emergency response system with law enforcement and hospital. I was just speaking with Denise Shapici about that just Monday. And so it's really about finding the space that resonates with you as a supporter. It might be hosting a cocktail party to have me come talk to some of your friends who are interested in supporting community services. It might be coming to campus and to touring, bringing some friends to tour our beautiful new site and to see our bold vision for phase 2 and what that will look like. It might be contributing in some other volunteer way or other mechanisms. So I think it really is personal. The way that you give and decide to give, I think really is a personal decision, and we're open to all of those things. You know, we're here today because we're launching this bold new vision for community services, where we've turned the curve and the corner from COVID, and now we're looking at a bright future. We have a great blueprint and a strategic plan, and so we're looking to you to join in ways to learn more about what we're doing and to join in ways that are meaningful for you.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Vicki. The next question will come from Iris Freeman, and then she'll be followed by Dr. Lorna.
Oh.
Hi, Iris.
Hi, I think I'm dressed as your evil twin today. Gratitude for all that has been done under the hardest of circumstances. I'm intrigued and pleased to hear about the clinical training and welcome mat program especially for new professionals. You mentioned housing, and my question is, how are you going to do that?
Well, we have an exciting new venture underway. It is at the beginning stages, but the strategic plan has been blessed by the board, who participated in its development as well. And we are entering into a relationship with 2 supporters in the community who have purchased a property. We're going to lease that property up and hopefully work with West Tisbury to bring it to fruition as a residence for these 5 clinicians. And so we're at the very beginning phase of this. We have the site has been cited, and we have some initial, policies, but we have a lot of work to do. Our goal is to have these residents assume residency at the end of August for a September launch. So we have a lot of work to do to clear the pathway for that. But the property was I think the biggest get, and we had some wonderful supporters step up and offer this property, and then we put our heads together at Community Services to find the highest and best use of that property, and that's what we came up with.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Beth, and thank you, Iris. Dr. Lorna, you had a question? We're having trouble hearing you, Dr. Lorna. Do you want to put it into the chat? While Dr. Lorna is typing, does anyone else have a question? Scanning the screen.
Hi, this is Ed Ludwig. Could you, Beth? Hi, how you doing? Good. Could you, Beth, and hi, Barbara, and everyone else? Could you share some areas of cooperation with other charitable organizations, for lack of a better word, other island institutions? My wife and I are involved with the Island Housing Trust, speaking of affordable housing. I know there's interfaces perhaps with the Y and the could you just talk about how your organization is interfacing with some of your colleague organizations on the island to sort of amplify the abilities? Thank you.
Absolutely. I think our partnerships are just so integral to the work that we do. We actually have an entire part of our strategic plan on strengthening the existing partnerships. And we recognize that in order to best serve our island, we need to have a coordinated effort. Our principal partners, I would say, are the Martha's Vineyard Public Schools, for sure. We work very closely with all the law enforcement, the chiefs. We meet routinely, and we have a very unified effort, and law enforcement have my number and text me when there's a problem. And so we really work hard to work collaboratively to meet the needs of islanders. MV Youth is critical to our work. We're part of all kinds of coalitions, the Diversity Coalition, the Substance Use Disorder Coalition, the Island Disability Coalition. Our staff are on all of these fine groups that inform our services, and we actually included several of those groups in our strategic assessment and planning process. Especially the Diversity Coalition, we had a very specific meeting related to improving access to our services, and we are creating some new positions. We're forming a translation and interpretation service so we can better serve the Brazilian population, and also creating a navigator position in our emergency services department to help build bridges between our emergency services and other connectors in the community. I don't know, Barbara, if you, Barbara, or any of my other staff who might want to highlight other partners, but we're really part of so many organizations. I would say those are the most significant, the ones that come readily to mind.
Yep. I would also, Jennifer Vogel, our program director for the Island Counseling Center, is on, and I was wondering if she might have some additional input on that. Jen?
No, I think that was a pretty comprehensive list. Thank you.
Great. The only things I would add is that particularly on housing and emergency financial assistance, we're working very closely with community members across the board, law enforcement, the schools, the hospital, Dukes County Regional Housing Authority, to make sure that islanders who are impacted both physically and economically by COVID don't have their housing be put at risk during this time. So as Beth, I think, mentioned, we dispersed over $350,000.
I would like to segue off of that too, Ed,
yeah.
and just to answer Ed's question, Martha's Vineyard Hospital has been hugely supportive. Heather mentioned the Pathway program, and we created that program to provide, to strengthen our salaries and performance-based compensation for the professional development of early childhood teachers. And when I went to Denise, they stepped forward right away, and they were among the first donors to that program. And we raised over $200,000 for that program, which will support those enhanced salaries for the next couple of years. And it's important to know, Heather also mentioned that our fees do not pay for the services in early childhood program. We operate that program at a sizable loss. And so in order to enhance the salaries, we had to do separate fundraising to put aside funds for that. And the hospital was a key contributor to that.
Thanks, Beth. And thanks, Ed, for the question.
We're lucky to have Denise and you guys as well. I'm very active with the hospital.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back to Dr. Lorna's question, and then there's another question for Ron. I think if there's one more after Ron's, that'll take us to time. But Dr. Lorna put into the chat, thank you all for what you do. I want to know, what mechanism do you have in place for more diverse clinical staff in the residency program?
We have created in our budget this year some specialized categories for staff who bring additional linguistic capacity to our center. And so, so we're looking to build that out. I think that as we look forward to bringing in those, the 5 clinicians into the residency program, we are keeping an eye to cultural characteristics so that they're reflective of the communities they serve. And so that is in the front part of our thinking. We're very, and the other part of that equation is creating a central place at community services where we bring in interpretive and translation services into our organization, and we have some special funding for that for the next fiscal year too. So I think those efforts, in addition to our participation on the Diversity Coalition and some other community-based work, will help us build some bridges into those underserved communities.
Thanks, Beth. And then Ron also put into the chat, how will the in-person, face-to-face utilization of the new facility be different from past use given COVID-19 being endemic in the US?
We are designing the new facility to accommodate what we call at Community Services a hybrid model. And so we've tried to shave space off of this this space too, but we're not able to do it. So we're upwards of about 20,000 square feet in the current iteration. We do have some shared space, but we have moved to a hybrid model where we are able to have some people work remotely while others are on campus. And we're looking to leverage outdoor spaces more fully than we ever have before, so that people can, our clients can have groups outdoors and use that space similarly. So I think it's a combination of, it will be a greater space. It's going to be sizable, but also this hybrid work model, we have found it to be very effective. It's sort of an artifact of COVID. We didn't expect it to actually be beneficial, but we find that our staff like it. It can be more effective in some areas of operations, and it also has a benefit to safety as well, physical distancing and so forth.
Beth, I can add to that, specific to the new early childhood center, that fortunately we had engaged prior to the pandemic South Mountain as the design build firm. And they really had creating a healthy space at the forefront of what they were doing, you know, even prior to COVID becoming part of the equation. So in my conversations with South Mountain over the course of the last year, one of the topics has been ventilation, which is one of the things that in my work I've discovered can have the biggest impact on illness not spreading within an early education and care center. And I have been assured by them that we will have some of the cleanest air on the island, which gives me great confidence. The other positive of the way that the space is designed is that it's incredibly flexible. During the pandemic, one of the things that we've had to do is have folks enter through external entrances in order to keep groups separate. We will have that flexibility in the new space. We have a beautiful central hall that was designed with community in mind, and we are hopeful to be using that in September. However, we also recognize that, as Ron is indicating, the COVID is here, that if we ever need to go back to having flexibility and having folks enter through external entrances, we will have that as an option.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks, Ron, for the question. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. So I will call everyone's attention to the chat. Sandy Sadaka, our Capital Campaign and Major Gifts Officer, has thrown her contact info in there. So if there's any other questions that come up after the session, please feel free to reach out to Sandy and she'll make sure we get answers to you. So thanks again for your attendance today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Beth for some final comments.
Thank you, Barbara. On behalf of our board chair, Michael Goldsmith, who I see here today, and our full board and other members of our management and leadership staff, we're just so pleased to have our host our guests today. We're so pleased that you joined us today for this really important event, and we'd like to thank you for being here today, taking time from your work and your life to spend an hour or more learning about what we're up to. So we really appreciate that. I would like to thank James and MV Bank. Thank you so much for hosting today and for your incredible support for community services. We couldn't do what we do without you and your partnership. So thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Heather Quinn for just doing such a lovely job, but for her passion, her expertise, everything she brings to community services. As you can see, like, she's just a gem. She really is an incredible human being. So thank you, Heather, for your work today, but each and every day in our early childhood programs. I'd also like to thank our development team under Barbara's leadership. They do such a wonderful job. They have a tall order in front of them in the next couple of years to raise our capital for our capital campaign, and they do all kinds of neat things, including Possible Dreams, which is coming up this summer. So we're looking forward to a wonderful event at the end of July. So thank you, Barbara, and your team for everything that you do. And then to all of you, in closing, I just encourage you. I think Sandy Sadaka she's our major gifts officer. She put her contact information. Feel free to email me or call me, and I'll do my very best to be responsive. And I thank you very much for your time today. Thanks.
Thanks,
Beth from James, just chiming in. I feel it'd be remiss if I didn't thank you, Community Services, Beth, Heather, Barbara, everyone at Community Services for what you do for the island and supporting the island community. You help sustain an authentic and real place to live, a real community. And we wouldn't be anywhere near as healthy a community if it weren't for Martha's Vineyard Community Services. So thank you for all you do, sincerely.
Thank you so much.
You do noble work.
Good job.
It's our honor. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your afternoon.